A tiny boy in overalls sat alone at a cookie stand, trying to save his dying friend's life, while strangers walked past laughing and calling it pathetic, until the ground started to shake and dozens of Hell's Angels motorcycles filled the street, their engines roaring like thunder. What these tattoo giants did next didn't just save one child's life, it exposed the darkest truth about who we really are when a kid needs help, and forced an entire town to face themselves. But here's what nobody saw coming. Why would the most feared motorcycle club in America drop everything for a 4-year-old they'd never met? And what would their arrival teach an entire town about who the real heroes are? The afternoon sun hangs heavy over the cracked asphalt outside Jimmy's diner, oppressive heat that makes the air shimmer and dance above the pavement, wavering like unreachable water. And there in the middle of it all sits a round wooden table that's seen better days, its surface scarred with initials and coffee rings from 1,000 forgotten conversations. Behind that table stands Danny, 4 years old, with blonde hair that catches the light like spun gold, wearing denim overalls 2 sizes too big that keep slipping off one shoulder no matter how many times he hitches them back up, and a bright blue tank top that matches the cloudless sky stretching endlessly above him. His pudgy toddler fingers carefully arrange chocolate chip cookies on a paper plate, straightening them with the intense focus only 4-year-olds possess when everything depends on getting it right. And in front of him sits a glass jar with a handwritten sign taped to it that reads, "Cookies for my sick friend's surgery," in crayon letters that slant up and down like a heartbeat on a monitor. The jar already has some money in it. 6 crumpled dollar bills and a handful of coins that his grandmother put there this morning, telling him with tears in her eyes that every journey starts with a single step, though Danny doesn't quite understand what journeys have to do with cookies or why grown-ups always cry when they're trying to say something important. Danny's best friend Carter is in the hospital 2 towns over, has been there for 3 weeks now, and even though Danny is only 4, he understands that Carter's heart is seriously damaged, that it doesn't work the way hearts are supposed to work, that it needs to be fixed, or Carter might not come home. He remembers the last time he saw Carter, in that hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and sadness, where Carter lay in a bed too big for his small body, wires and tubes snaking out from under the blankets, and Carter had smiled at him, the familiar crooked smile that made Danny feel brave when they played nights in the backyard, and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll be home soon." But his voice sounded distant and hollow, as if echoing from deep underwater. Danny's mama had driven him home that night in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, and later he'd heard her on the phone with Carter's mama. Heard words like insurance denied and $40,000 and I don't know what we're gonna do. And even though Danny doesn't understand insurance or money in the way adults do, he understands that his friend needs help and nobody seems able to give it. So yesterday he tugged on his grandmother's sleeve and said, "Grandma, can we make cookies? Really, really good ones?" She looked at him with those wise old eyes that had seen 83 years of joy and heartbreak. "What for, sweet boy?" He answered with the simple certainty of a child who hasn't yet learned the world is complicated. To save Carter. They'd baked all evening in his grandmother's kitchen, that warm space filled with the smell of butter and sugar and vanilla, and she'd guided his small hands as he stirred the batter, her arthritic fingers trembling slightly as they covered his, teaching him to fold in the chocolate chips gently, to scoop the dough onto the baking sheets in little perfect mounds. And while they worked, she'd told him stories about his grandfather, about how he'd always believed that goodness was contagious, that one act of kindness could ripple outward like a stone thrown into still water. Now, here Danny stands in the afternoon heat, shifting his weight from foot to foot in his sneakers with the Velcro straps, waiting for the goodness his grandmother promised, waiting for the ripples to start. A woman in a business suit walks past talking on her phone, glances at his table without breaking stride, and keeps walking toward the diner entrance, and Danny calls out in his small, clear voice, "Cookies for my friend!" But she doesn't turn around. A couple strolls by, holding hands, and they smile at him the way adults smile at cute things they see in passing. Puppies in windows, flowers in sidewalk cracks, little boys playing businessman, but they don't stop. And the man says to the woman, just loud enough for Danny to hear, "That's precious, but you know the parents are probably behind it." And the woman nods, and they disappear into the diner's cool interior, leaving Danny standing there wondering what behind it means and why that would be bad. An hour passes, marked by the creeping shadow of the diner's awning, and Danny has sold exactly 3 bags of cookies, $9 that sit in his jar looking impossibly small, next to the number 40,000 that keeps echoing in his head even though he can't quite picture what 40,000 of anything looks like. His legs are starting to ache from standing, and the sun is making him squint, even though he's trying so hard to smile at everyone who passes, because his mama always says that smiles are free and powerful. But right now, his smile feels heavy, like something he has to hold up with effort. A teenager on a skateboard rolls past with his friend, and they both look at Danny's sign, look at his cookies, and the first one laughs and says, "Dude, that's so cringe, like a bake sale is gonna pay for surgery." And his friend responds, "Right? That's like something from a movie, not real life." And they coast away laughing, their wheels clicking over the pavement joints in a rhythm that sounds like mockery. Danny feels a knot tightening in his chest, heat prickling behind his eyes, but he blinks hard because crying is for babies, and he's trying to be brave like Carter, trying to be the kind of friend who doesn't give up even when things are hard. Then a woman in expensive sunglasses stops, actually stops, and Danny's heart leaps with hope as she bends down to read his sign, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer purse. And she calls over her shoulder to her friend, "Jessica, come look at this, it's adorable." But the way she says adorable makes it sound like she's discovered something quaint in a museum, something to observe but not engage with. Jessica walks over, reads the sign, and both women stand there looking at Danny like he's a painting, and the first woman says, "Can you imagine, like a cookie sale is going to make a difference? I mean, it's sweet, but somebody should tell these people how the real world works." And Jessica nods and adds, "Probably one of those GoFundMe scams. They use kids because people fall for the cute factor." And they walk away discussing dinner plans, their voices fading into the ambient noise of the parking lot, car doors slamming, engines starting, the world moving forward without pause. Danny stands there, his small hands gripping the edge of his table, staring down at his cookies that suddenly look sad and homemade and inadequate, at his jar with its pathetic $15, at the sign he'd been so proud of this morning that now feels like a joke he doesn't understand. And for the first time in his short life, he begins to comprehend that trying hard isn't always enough, that believing in goodness doesn't summon it, that the world is bigger and colder and more complicated than his grandmother's kitchen, where everything smelled like hope and tasted like love. The sun climbs higher, turning the pavement into a griddle that bakes through the soles of Danny's sneakers. He's been standing here for 3 hours, an eternity compressed into one afternoon, watching the same cycle repeat itself over and over. People glancing, his people smiling, that empty smile, people walking away. His overalls stick to his back with sweat. He's down to his last 2 bags of cookies because he ate 3 himself when his stomach started growling, and there was nobody around to buy them anyway. Guilt gnaws at him. Those were Carter's cookies, Carter's chance, Carter's hope wrapped in chocolate chips and good intentions. A man in a pickup truck pulls into the parking lot, and Danny watches him with rekindled optimism as he parks and walks toward the diner, actually heading straight for Danny's table. And Danny straightens up, wiping his sweaty palms on his overalls, preparing his best sales pitch the way his mama taught him. The man stops, looks at the sign, looks at Danny, and his face does something complicated, something between pity and disgust, and he says in a loud voice that carries across the parking lot, "This is what's wrong with people these days, using kids to scam money. You should be ashamed of yourself." And Danny says in confusion, "But it's for Carter, he needs..." And the man cuts him off with, "Kid, I don't know who put you up to this, but real medical care doesn't come from cookie sales, and real parents don't exploit their children." And he walks into the diner, shaking his head, leaving Danny standing there with his mouth half open, trying to process words like scam and exploit, that he doesn't understand but knows aren't good from the way they landed in the air like stones. 2 women come out of the diner, both around his mama's age, and one of them spots Danny and says to her companion, "Oh my God, Brenda, look, that poor baby's still out here." And Brenda looks over and sighs and says, "I know, I saw him when we went in. It just breaks your heart. But what are you supposed to do? My cousin tried to help a situation like this once, and it turned out to be a complete fraud." The family didn't even have a sick kid. The first woman nods sadly and says, "That's the world we live in. You can't trust anything anymore. And they always use children because they know it works." And they walk to their car still talking. And Danny wants to scream that Carter is real, that he's in room 347 with the Superman poster his dad taped to the wall, that his heart makes a funny sound through the stethoscope like water trying to move through a kinked hose, that this isn't fake or fraud or whatever these people think it is, but his voice won't work anymore. It's stuck somewhere deep in his chest along with all the other feelings that are piling up like toys he can't fit back in the box. A family walks past, a mom, a dad, 2 kids about Danny's age, and the kids point at his table and ask if they can get cookies, and Danny's hope surges again, but the dad says, "No, we're not encouraging this," and the mom adds gently to her children, "Sometimes people do things that seem nice but aren't real, and we have to be careful." And they steer the kids away while the little girl looks back over her shoulder at Danny with confusion in her eyes. And Danny understands in that moment that she wanted to help him, that maybe kids understand better than grown-ups, but kids don't have money or choices or voices that adults listen to. 4 hours in, and the jar has grown to $23. A few more cookies sold to people who bought them more out of pity than belief. And Danny's grandmother texts his mama's phone asking how it's going, and his mama, who's working a double shift at the nursing home, texts back a lie. Great, he's having fun. Because what else can she say? That people are calling her son a scam artist, that strangers are lecturing a 4-year-old about how the real world works, that all her boy's hope and effort are being met with suspicion and mockery. Danny doesn't know about the texts, doesn't know his mama is crying in a supply closet between patient rounds, doesn't know that Carter's mama got a call this morning saying that without payment arrangements, the surgery scheduled for 3 weeks from now will be postponed indefinitely. Doesn't understand the cascading weight of everything riding on his small shoulders. And maybe that's a blessing, because if he knew, he might just pack up his cookies and go home and let the world be cold and complicated without him. Instead, he stands there, this tiny figure at his weathered table, rearranging his remaining cookies for the 100th time, straightening his sign that's starting to curl in the heat, guarding his jar like it contains something more precious than $23, like it contains proof that the world isn't entirely broken, that somewhere under all the cynicism and fear and hardness, there's still something soft and good. A group of teenagers appears, 4 of them, probably 16 or 17, with that casual cruelty that comes from being old enough to feel powerful, but young enough not to understand consequences. And they walk right up to Danny's table, laughing among themselves. The tallest one, wearing a backward cap and a smirk, reads the sign out loud in a mocking voice. "Cookies for my sick friend's surgery. Oh my God, that's so pathetic." And his friends laugh, and another one says, "Bro, this is like some Instagram poverty porn. Who even does this anymore?" And a third adds, "Probably doesn't even have a sick friend, probably just wants candy money." And they're talking about Danny like he isn't standing right there, like he's part of the scenery. And the tall one reaches out and flicks the sign so it tilts sideways, and Danny's hands shoot out to straighten it, and the boy says, "Dude's really committed to the bit," and they all laugh harder. Danny feels a fracture spreading inside him. The fragile resolve that's held together all afternoon, finally cracking, despite the rejection and the suspicion and the casual dismissals. His eyes start to burn with tears. He's been fighting since noon, and his chin trembles, and the teenagers notice, and one of them says, "Oh shit, he's gonna cry, we broke him." But there's no sympathy in the voice, just entertainment, and they walk away still laughing, still talking about him. And Danny stands there with tears rolling down his cheeks that he can't stop anymore, staring at his cookies that nobody wants, at his sign that people mock, at his jar with its $23 that feels like 23 failures. And he thinks about Carter in that hospital bed, about how he promised he'd help, about how trying your best is supposed to matter. And he wonders why nobody told him that sometimes your best isn't good enough, that sometimes the world just doesn't care how hard you try, or how much you love someone, or how pure your intentions are. The parking lot is starting to empty out as afternoon bleeds toward evening, shadows growing longer and darker. And Danny is completely alone now, except for the distant sound of traffic on the highway and the buzz of the diner's neon sign flickering to life overhead. He's thinking about packing up, about carrying his failure home in a cardboard box, about what he'll say to his grandmother who believed in him, about whether Carter will ever know he tried when he first hears it. A sound so low and deep, it registers as sensation rather than hearing, a rumble rising from the earth itself, from somewhere ancient and powerful, growing louder and closer until the air vibrates with its force. Danny looks up, his tear-stained face confused as the sound builds and builds like approaching thunder. And then he sees them appearing at the parking lot entrance, one after another, motorcycles rolling in like a river of chrome and leather, their engines roaring with a sound that drowns out everything else, that makes the windows of the diner rattle in their frames, and Danny steps back from his table with wide eyes, not quite afraid, but overwhelmed, as these massive machines fill the parking lot with noise and presence and an energy that feels like the air before a lightning strike. The motorcycles keep coming, flowing into the parking lot like a steel river that has no end, chrome gleaming under the late afternoon sun, leather creaking, chains rattling, and the riders are enormous. Mountain-sized men with shoulders that block out the sky, arms covered in tattoos so dense and intricate they look like living tapestries of angels and demons and screaming eagles, beards that hang thick and wild, faces weathered by wind and road and years of living hard. They wear leather vests covered in patches, skulls and flames, and words Danny can't read from where he stands, except for the big ones across the back that say Hell's Angels, in letters that look like they were forged in fire. And as they kill their engines one by one, the silence that follows is somehow louder than the roar that preceded it, thick with potential. Heavy with an energy Danny can't name but feels in his bones. There must be 30 of them, maybe 40, filling every parking space and spilling out into the spaces between, and people who were walking to their cars stop frozen, and faces appear in the diner windows, and someone inside whispers loud enough to carry, "Oh my God, what are they doing here?" in a voice edged with fear, because these are not the kind of men who usually stop at Jimmy's Diner on a Tuesday afternoon. These are not the kind of men who stop anywhere without a reason. The first to approach Danny's table is a man who appears carved from ancient oak and weathered by storms. Easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders built for bearing impossible weights. His dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, shot through with silver. A thick beard that's more gray than black, and tattoos that climb up his neck and across his knuckles and down his forearms in designs so detailed Danny can make out tiny faces, flowers, dates, names of people loved and lost. His vest bears patches that tell stories Danny can't read, places he's been, things he's done, a life lived on the margins of what polite society considers acceptable. And his face is all hard angles and old scars, one cutting through his left eyebrow, another along his jawline. A roadmap of violence survived, but when he drops to one knee before Danny's table, lowering himself until his eyes meet the boys, his expression shifts into unexpected gentleness. The way mountains look soft in morning light. His eyes are blue, startlingly blue, the kind of blue that seems to look straight through you and see everything you're trying to hide. And his voice when he speaks is gravel and honey mixed together, rough edge but warm, and he says, "Hey there, little man, what's your name?" And Danny, who has been holding his breath without realizing it, lets it out in a rush and whispers, "Danny." The big man nods slowly, his eyes moving from Danny's tear-stained face to the sign on the jar, reading every word with careful attention. His lips moving slightly as he processes what he's seeing, and then his gaze drops to the cookies, to the paper plate with its humble offerings, to the jar with its $23 that suddenly seems even more pathetic next to this giant's presence, and the man's face changes. His eyes tighten, his lips compress, as if he's just witnessed confirmation of what he already knew about the world, a truth that makes him angry and sad at the same time. He reaches out one massive hand, tattooed knuckles spelling out words Danny can't quite make out, and he touches the sign gently, almost reverently, the way you'd touch something fragile and precious, and he says, "Your friend's name, Carter?" And Danny nods eagerly, grateful that someone is finally asking, finally listening, and he says in a rush, "Yes, sir. Carter needs surgery on his heart, and it costs lots of money, and his mama can't pay. And I thought, if I sold cookies, maybe I could help. But nobody wants them. And some people said I was a scam, but I'm not a scam. I promise, Carter's real, and he's sick, and I just want to help him." The words tumble out like they've been dammed up all afternoon, and by the end, Danny's crying again, unable to stop himself. And the big man just nods, taking it all in, his jaw working like he's chewing on something tough. And then he says in that gravelly voice, "I'm Bear, and you're about the bravest kid I've ever met." Bear stands up to his full height and calls out in a voice that carries across the entire parking lot, cutting through the evening air like a blade. "Brothers, we got a situation here." Every single biker turns to look. 30-something pairs of eyes focus on the weathered table. The small boy. The sign that explains everything. Bear continues. "This here is Danny, and Danny's best friend Carter needs heart surgery that his family can't afford. And Danny's been out here all day trying to raise money selling cookies his grandmother made, and you know what he's gotten for his trouble. He's gotten mocked, called a scam, had teenagers make fun of him, had grown-ass adults walk by like he's invisible." Bear's voice is rising now, getting harder, angrier, and Danny watches as the other bikers start moving forward, creating a semicircle around the table, their faces showing various expressions of understanding, of recognition, of barely contained rage at the injustice of it all. Bear pulls out his wallet, thick leather worn soft from years in his back pocket, and he opens it and pulls out bills, 100, 200, 300, and he stuffs them into Danny's jar, and he says, "I'll take all your cookies, Danny, every single one, and you keep the change." And suddenly every other biker is moving forward, hands reaching for wallets, for money clips, for crumpled bills and vest pockets. And they're lining up like this is the most important thing they'll do all week, all month, maybe all year. A biker named Reaper steps up next, his face hidden behind a thick red beard, his arms so densely inked they appear black from a distance. He pulls out $200 and says, "Carter's a lucky kid to have a friend like you," then drops it in the jar. Behind him comes another called Chains, then Widow, then more, one after another. These men with scary names and scarred faces and hands that have held wrenches and beer bottles and steering wheels through 1,000 midnight rides, and every single one of them gives money. Gives more than the cookies are worth. Gives like they're paying for something bigger than baked goods. Like they're making a statement about what matters and what doesn't. About who deserves help and who deserves scorn. About where they stand when a 4-year-old boy tries to save his friend's life and the world turns away. One of them, a younger biker maybe 30 years old with Prospect on his vest, gets on his phone and makes a call, and Danny can hear him saying, "Yeah, Jimmy's Diner, right now. You need to get down here with a camera. I'm telling you this is the story. This is what people need to see." And within minutes, a news van is pulling into the parking lot because apparently even the local television station jumps when a Hell's Angel says, "Jump." Or maybe because they recognize this is authentic, an event that cuts through the usual noise. Bear lowers himself again before Danny, who stares at his jar in disbelief, because it's overflowing now, bills sticking out in every direction, more money than he's ever seen in his life. And Bear says, "Danny, I need you to listen to me real careful, okay? I want you to know that what you did today, standing out here even when people were mean, even when they didn't believe you, even when it was hard, that took more guts than most men I know will show in their whole lives. You understand me? You're a warrior, little man. And your friend Carter is damn lucky to have you." Danny nods, overwhelmed, and Bear reaches out and ruffles his hair with one massive hand, gentle despite its size, and then he stands and addresses his brothers again, his voice carrying that note of command that comes from years of leading men who follow no one else. "Brothers, I want this story everywhere, every platform, every feed, every corner of the internet where people need to see what real loyalty looks like. What a child can teach us about not giving up on people we love. And I want everyone who walked past this boy today, everyone who mocked him, everyone who called him a scam, to see what happens when you bet against goodness, to see that we're watching, that we remember, that there are still some people in this world who show up when kids need help." Another biker is filming now, holding up his phone, and Bear turns to the camera and his face is stone, his voice cold and hard, and he says directly into the lens, "This is for everyone out there who thinks it's okay to mock a child trying to save his friend. This is for everyone who walked past this table today with your judgment and your cynicism and your small, scared hearts. This boy, Danny, showed more courage in 4 hours than most of you will show in your entire lives. And if your first instinct, when you see innocence and effort and pure love, is to tear it down, to call it fake, to protect yourself from feeling something real, then you don't deserve to share the road we ride on. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as kids like this. The camera captures everything. Bear's face, Danny's wonder, the jar overflowing with money, the ring of massive bikers standing guard like warrior angels around this tiny boy and his table. And within the hour, it will be viewed 100,000 times. Within the day, 1,000,000. Within the week, it will have circled the globe and sparked conversations about compassion and cynicism and what we've become as a society. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters. Right now, all that matters is that Danny is not alone anymore, that someone saw him, that someone believed. The news van is setting up. The reporter is checking her makeup in a compact mirror, and people begin gathering at the parking lot's edges, drawn by the motorcycles, the crowd, the sense of witnessing something important. Cars pull in now, not for the diner, but to see what all the commotion is about. And when they learn about Danny and Carter, they're pulling out their own wallets, some of them sheepish, some of them crying, some of them angry at themselves for having walked past earlier without stopping. A woman in business clothes approaches, the same one who'd walked by 3 hours ago talking on her phone, and she can't look Danny in the eye as she puts a 50 in his jar and says quietly, "I'm sorry, I should have stopped before." And Bear nods at her like he's granting absolution, like he's deciding whether she gets to be forgiven, and she walks away quickly with her head down. The man from the pickup truck comes out of the diner, sees the scene, realizes what he said earlier, and he turns around and goes back inside without approaching, unable to face his own judgment reflected back at him. And Bear notices and says to no one in particular, "That's right, you hide. You remember what you said to a 4-year-old trying to save a life? You carry that." The sun is painting the sky in shades of orange and purple now, that magic hour when everything looks like it's been dipped in gold. And Danny's jar has been replaced with a bucket, and the bucket has been replaced with a cardboard box from the diner's storage room, because the money keeps coming, keeps flowing in like the universe is trying to correct an imbalance. Like all the goodness that should have been here this afternoon is showing up late but determined to make its presence known. Bear is on his phone now, and Danny can hear him talking to someone about a GoFundMe page, about matching donations, about getting Carter's family connected with people who can help navigate the insurance nightmare. And other bikers are making calls too, tapping into networks that exist in the shadows of society, communities of men and women who live outside the mainstream but understand loyalty and protection, and showing up when civilians fail. The local news goes live, the reporter standing next to Danny with her microphone, asking him in that gentle voice adults use with small children, "Danny, can you tell us about Carter, about why this was so important to you?" And Danny, no longer shy because he's surrounded by giants who believe in him, says clearly into the camera, "Carter's my best friend, and he shares his lunch with me even when he only has a little bit, and he lets me be the knight when we play, even though he's bigger and his heart doesn't work right, and I just wanted to help him. Because that's what friends do, they help each other. And I don't understand why so many people were mean today, because I thought grown-ups were supposed to be nice and help kids. But these men, these bikers, they were the only ones who really helped. And I think they're heroes, even though some people are scared of them." The reporter has tears in her eyes, and she's no longer trying to hide them, and she turns to Bear and asks, "What made you stop today? What made the Hells Angels decide to help this little boy?" And Bear looks at her with those piercing blue eyes and says, "We stopped because we know what it's like to be judged by how you look, to be dismissed before anyone knows your story, to be told you don't matter by people who think they're better than you. We stopped because every single man here has been that kid at some point. Maybe not selling cookies, but standing alone trying to do something good while the world walked past. We stopped because if we don't protect kids like Danny, if we don't show up when innocence calls for help, then what the hell are we even doing with our lives? We ride for freedom. But freedom means nothing if you're not free to be good, if you're not free to help without people questioning your motives or calling you a scam." His voice catches slightly on the last words, revealing something raw underneath all that leather and muscle and attitude, revealing that these men who the world sees as dangerous are maybe the most human people in this parking lot, the most willing to be vulnerable, to feel something real, to act on it without calculating the social cost. The online fundraiser goes live during the broadcast, and the donations start pouring in, $10, $50, $100, people from across the country who see the video of Bear's speech, who see Danny's small face lighting up as the bikers surround him, who feel something shift inside them, some reminder of who they wanted to be before cynicism and disappointment and fear taught them to protect themselves by caring less. Within an hour, the fundraiser hits $20,000. Within 2 hours, it's at $40,000. By the time the sun finally sets, it's at $60,000 and still climbing. Enough for Carter's surgery and the recovery and the follow-up care, and maybe even a little left over for his family, who've been drowning in medical debt for years, who've been choosing between electricity and prescriptions, who've been holding their son at night while he struggled to breathe and wondering if love could possibly be enough to keep him alive. Bear gets a call from Carter's mother, and he puts her on speakerphone so Danny can hear, and her voice comes through broken with crying, barely intelligible, saying, "I don't know who you are. I don't know how to thank you. I don't understand how this happened, but you saved my son, you saved my baby." And Bear says gently, "Ma'am, we didn't save your son. Danny here saved your son. We just made sure people were watching when he did it." And Danny is crying too now, happy tears this time, understanding finally that it worked, that Carter is going to be okay, that trying hard and refusing to give up and believing in goodness actually mattered, actually changed something real. Danny's mama arrives in a rush, having left work early when the nursing home staff showed her the video going viral on their phones. And she pulls up to find her tiny son surrounded by a ring of massive bikers, like some kind of fairy tale where the dragons turned out to be the good guys. And she runs to him and scoops him up, and he wraps his arms around her neck and says into her shoulder, "Mama, we did it. Carter's gonna be okay." And she's sobbing and nodding and saying, "I know, baby, I know. You did so good. I'm so proud of you." And Bear gives them space, but he's standing close, protective. And when Danny's mama finally looks at him with red eyes and says, "Thank you, I don't know how to thank you," he just shakes his head and says, "Your boy's got something special, ma'am. Something the world tries to beat out of people but didn't get to him yet. You did good raising him. Now you make sure he never forgets that standing up for people you love is never wrong, even when people try to make you feel like it is." The other bikers are starting to mount their motorcycles now, the show winding down. But Bear has one more thing to do, and he crouches down in front of Danny one last time and says, "Danny, I need you to make me a promise, okay? When Carter gets better, when he comes home from that hospital, you tell him that a bunch of bikers he never met fought for him, that strangers cared about his life, that the world isn't as cold as it sometimes seems, and you remember that what you did today mattered, that you changed things, that you saved a life. Can you promise me that?" And Danny nods solemnly, understanding somehow that this moment is bigger than cookies and money, that it's about something he'll spend the rest of his life learning to name. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, bright with possibility, Carter comes home from the hospital with a scar running down his chest, fading but permanent, a lasting reminder that he was broken and then made whole, that his body failed him, but medicine and love and a friend's determination pulled him back from wherever he was going. He's still weak, still moving carefully, but there's color in his cheeks that wasn't there before, and his smile is the same crooked, wonderful thing that made Danny laugh in preschool when Carter tried to juggle crayons and drop them all over the floor. Danny is waiting on his front porch, bouncing on his toes with excitement he can barely contain. And when Carter's dad helps him out of the car, Danny runs to him, then stops himself, remembering the doctors said to be gentle. And instead, he walks up slowly and says, "I missed you so much." And Carter says, "I heard what you did. I heard about everything. You're like a superhero." And Danny shakes his head and says, "The bikers were the superheroes. I just made cookies." But Carter says, "No, you didn't give up on me. You stood out there even when people were mean. My mama told me everything. You saved my life." Danny. And they stand there looking at each other with the complicated understanding that they will be connected forever now in ways that go beyond shared lunches and playground games, that Danny will always be the boy who fought for him, and Carter will always be the one worth fighting for. The rumble starts then, distant but unmistakable, and both boys look up as the motorcycles appear down the street, 20 of them rolling slow and careful through the residential neighborhood. Bear leading the pack on his massive black and chrome bike that gleams like dark water. They pull up in front of Carter's house, and the neighbors come out onto their porches, some of them nervous, some of them curious, all of them aware that this is something rare and important. And Bear kills his engine and climbs off and walks up to Carter, and he kneels before Carter, just as he had with Danny, examining the scar visible above Carter's shirt collar, and he says in that gravel and honey voice, "You must be Carter. I'm Bear. Your friend Danny here moved heaven and earth for you, kid. How you feeling?" And Carter, who's 4 years old and probably should be scared of this giant tattooed man but somehow isn't, says, "I feel good. My heart works right now. The doctor said so." And Bear nods and says, "That's real good to hear. You got a best friend who loves you enough to face down the whole world for you. That's rare. That's precious. You hold on to that." Then Bear straightens up and calls out, "Who wants a ride?" And both boys' faces light up like Christmas morning, and Carter's mama comes running out saying, Wait, is that safe?" And Bear smiles at her, that rare expression that transforms his face into something warm and reassuring, and he says, "Ma'am, I've been riding 40 years and never dropped a passenger, and I promise you, I'm not starting with the kid Danny saved." And somehow she believes him. Somehow everyone believes him, because there's an authenticity to these men that transcends appearance, a code they live by that's more rigid than most people's laws. Bear lifts Carter onto his bike first, positioning him carefully in front where Bear can wrap protective arms around him, while another biker lifts Danny onto his own ride, and they do a slow, careful loop around the neighborhood, engines purring like sleeping tigers, going maybe 15 miles an hour, but feeling to two 4-year-old boys like they're flying, like they're heroes in their own story. And the other bikers follow in formation, creating a protective convoy around these two precious young lives they've decided matter more than whatever else they could be doing today. The whole street watches, neighbors filming on phones, kids running alongside on the sidewalk, parents crying without quite knowing why, except that it's beautiful somehow. This image of scarred, dangerous-looking men treating broken and brave little boys like they're made of gold and starlight. When they finally stop back in front of Carter's house and help the boys down, Bear reaches into his vest and pulls out 2 patches, small ones, and he hands one to each boy and says, "These are honorary Hell's Angels patches, just for you two, because you showed us what real brotherhood looks like, what loyalty means, what it takes to be the kind of men we try to be. You wear these and remember that you're always protected, always have brothers watching your back, always matter." The last image before the bikers leave is Danny and Carter sitting on the curb together, each holding their patch, watching the motorcycles pull away one by one. Engines fading into the distance like thunder moving over hills, and Danny reaches into his pocket and pulls out the final cookie, the one he saved from that first batch his grandmother made, wrapped carefully in plastic wrap and slightly crushed now, but still good. And he breaks it in half and hands one piece to Carter, and they sit there eating it in silence, the way friends do when words aren't enough, when everything important has already been said. Carter puts his hand over his heart, feeling the strong, steady beat underneath the scar, and he says quietly, "Does it hurt, what people said to you that day?" And Danny thinks about it, really thinks, and he says, "It hurt then, but it doesn't now, because you're okay, and that's all that mattered, and also because Bear said I was brave, and I think he was right." And Carter nods and says, "You are brave. You're the bravest person I know." And they sit there as the sun breaks through the clouds overhead, golden light spilling down like a blessing, warming their faces. And in that moment, they grasp without possessing the language that they have learned what people spend whole lives trying to figure out. Real love looks like action. Showing up when things are hard separates the people who matter from the ones who just take up space. Sometimes the scariest looking people are the ones who will stand between you and everything that wants to hurt you. And a 4-year-old boy selling cookies can change the world if he refuses to stop believing that goodness exists and that people will show up if you just give them the chance. And sometimes angels do wear leather and ride motorcycles and have scars and tattoos and pasts they don't talk about. And sometimes saving a life is as simple as standing at a table in a parking lot with homemade cookies and hope, refusing to leave, refusing to give up. Refusing to let the world's coldness freeze the warmth in your own heart.